I mean, there's so much more wrong with Minor Life than there was with the Star Turds
Yeah.
story.
And the thing about Starter, as I've said many times, was that as terrible as it was at least not that long.
Yeah, it was just 4 chapters. It was our first really bad story, and on top of that, it was a trap fic.
Yeah, yeah, that was really what.
That was
Yeah,
really what turned us against it because I don't like reading stories where a character who doesn't die like in the series. I know you don't care much for the word canon, but if it doesn't, like if a character doesn't die in canon, I don't really want to read about them dying in a story.
yeah. Well, and I don't tend to generally want to read about a character dying. Period.
Yeah,
Whether it is in what the author wrote or whether it's what someone else wrote, I don't want to deal
yeah,
with it. I don't want to read about it. I don't want to read anything of
yeah.
the sort.
I mean, because usually when you read fan fiction, they don't know how to do it properly, and it's just
Exactly.
horrible. Like,
I mean,
I want
it's
something terrible to happen to these characters, so it'll really feel dark and serious, but just
yeah,
because somebody dies for some reason doesn't mean it's a dark, serious
right.
story.
And it doesn't. People seem to confuse killing off a character with being serious and being good and all
Yes.
this. And it's really sad because they see the only way to make a story legitimate as having some sort of ridiculous forced conflict, massive conflict between Harry Potter did it, Twilight did it, and in both cases it didn't make a lick of sense and was shoehorned in out of nowhere. And people keep doing it in all their stories. They see it on stories like that, on series like that, and they think, oh, that's what I need to make it legit. It's not
Yeah.
really serious if we don't have someone killed off and then have some sort of huge overblown conflict that involves everyone and has a bunch of deaths that are just completely tossed in like confetti.
Yeah, I mean, even in my story, there are going to be at least 2 or 3 deaths, but I'm like, I don't really know. I mean, it wouldn't make sense not to have at least one of these characters die, and I'm still trying to figure out how I should do one of the later deaths. Try because I'm like, well, having the second death during that doesn't really make sense, but the first death does. And I'm like, and I don't really, and I don't want to kill characters that I don't have to kill. That's stupid. But if I want to have a character that dies, it should be for a very good reason. I should not just have character death for the sake of character death. I mean, there should be a really good reason why I decided this character should be removed from the story.
Yeah, and I think honestly, with most people, like I've said before, if you can find any other way to incapacitate a character short of killing them, you should do it instead of killing them. Because there are so many instances. And I'm like even authors I've known that actually had pretty big careers, like did pretty big things. Sometimes they would kill off a character and then they'd be like, shit, I shouldn't have killed off that character.
Yeah,
And now, and they could bring them back, but it might actually cheapen the fact that they were killed off. And it would make them look bad. It cheapens the story. It kind of whittles it down. And it also makes the character, if you do it too much, it can make the character seem
yeah,
unnecessarily flawed by the fact that they've seemed to die so many times and
yeah.
yet they aren't dead. But I've always respected the old tradition of if you don't see a body, they're not dead.
Hmm.
Like if a character appears to die, even if they appear to die and give a big long speech or something, if they don't find a body afterwards, well, they're probably still out there somewhere. You can just assume that. And that's okay by me. Like if it's a big dramatic thing, even if they never show up again, that's one of those things where you can let the audience determine whether or not it happened, and that's okay because in their minds, you haven't said any sort of decisive, final. pronouncement. And, you know, maybe they are out there somewhere. Even if you intend to kill off a character, sometimes that's the best way to do it, because then the people that love the character can believe, well, there's still a chance that they're out there somewhere, you know, and you know, their imaginations can still be going and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But if you kill off that character with a total finality and just make it absolutely unable to really work any other perspective in, so often that will break the spell that you have over the people that really love that character. And they will, by resistance, not want to be willing to suspend that disbelief anymore. It's happened to me a lot. I know it happens to a lot of people. Well, like the last book of Harry Potter killed it for a lot of people because they tossed in so much ridiculous character death that had no build-up, no reason, and was completely just, oh, we want to make this legit. We want to make this serious business, you know, so we'll kill off a bunch of characters that don't need to be killed off. Even the first real major death in the story was ridiculous. It was shoehorned in for that same reason. Every time you do that, you run the risk of, and you're sure to lose people.
Mm-hmm.
That always, like, I have an aversion to reading about death too much anyway, because I feel like a lot of the people that actually look for that either don't know how to deal with death or have not experienced a lot of death. Now, it's not everybody that writes it that is that way, but there are a lot of people that latch onto that either have never really dealt with the death of anyone that means anything to them, or they don't know how to deal with it, so they look to stories to find a way that they can kind of, I don't know, approach it through someone else's perspective. And either way, I just don't know if, like, there are stories, like when I was little, you know, there are those stories and they always win awards and whatnot, and they just kill off characters, and it's just like A Bridge to Terabithia, A Taste of Blackberries, and all those. They always just kill off characters, and it's all about, oh, well, it's a book for children, but it deals with death, so it must be profound and deep and...
Not necessarily.
I know, and at the time I was just like, I am so sick. I am so sick of these motherfucking books about death in this motherfucking elementary school library. like one time, I remember we had this librarian named Mrs. Torrance in one of these schools that I was in. It was grammar school, and she sort of looked like Carly Simon. And she's a very, very pretty woman, and just very, very kind, loved reading, loved children. And she knew I like cats. And so I was asking her of a book that I would like to read about cats. And I had already read just a bunch of books. I love to read more than anything, and more than just about any one in that school when I was very young. And you know, I read above my grade level, and so I was always asking her for ideas of books that I could read and things that might be pertinent to my taste. One time I wanted to find a book that, you know, about a cat that had a cat in it, because I grew up with cats and I thought of them as my siblings because I had no others, and we moved around so much I didn't really have any friends where I went. So the cats that lived with us were my siblings and my only sturdy friend. And so she suggested one, and I was like, I looked at it, it was something like Mr. Whiskers Forever. And just the title alone, I was like, the cat dies in this, doesn't he? And she was... she was like, you could tell she was really surprised that I liked that. I just cut right to that, and but then she started to just sort of, you know, smile. You know, she sort of wanted to laugh. But she just started to smile, and she was like, well, yes, the cat does die in that one. Let's see if we can find you another one. Like, I hate all these books where they always have the cat die. I think I got really just burned out on a lot of these stories because of that, because of all these children's books and children's stories. And you know that most of them were just, they saw the trend of, oh, write a book aimed at children and have someone die in it, and you get an award. And it really is a disturbing trend. Like, there are several articles on it, actually, which I found just a few years ago of people criticizing that because, just as I was saying, they were saying, just because you have someone die in it and have it be something aimed at children doesn't make it a good story, and it doesn't mean children want to read it. And as a child, I got really sick of that shit very fast. Like, I read A Bridge to Terabithia, which, oh, it's an award-winning book, and all these teachers go on and on. It was shit. It was stupid. The death was forced in it. There was no reason for it to happen. It ended up actually adding nothing to the story. It was one of those situations like The Lord of the Rings where it lingers too much after something happens that should logically be the end of the story. And you end up going away from it thinking, wow, that was a horribly unfulfilling, disappointing story that way overstayed its welcome. I can't believe it won an award.